Welcome back to the Python tutorial series. I'm so glad you're here. This is the 8th video in this series, and today we will be talking about while and for loops. We will first introduce while and for statements, and then discuss how to use break and continue in while and for loops. The timestamps are in the description below. So let's get started. First, you need to set something to a certain value, for example, I equals 0. Then you need a set of conditions. We're going to do while I is less than 5. And like a for loop, it ends in a colon, and then we do enter, and then we'll do print I. The third thing you need to do is that you need to change the variable. So I is equal to 0. Then after each iteration through the while loop, we add 1 to I. So I plus equals 1. So basically what this will do, it will say I equals 0. 0 is less than 5. So it's going to print 0. Then I is now 1. Prints 1. I is now 2, 3, 4. But when it comes to 5, 5 is not less than 5. So we are finished with this while loop when I equals 5 because 5 is not less than 5. So when we print this out, it prints out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, like expected. If you remember from the previous video when we talked about if statements, you can end if statements with else. You can do the same thing with while loops and for loops that we will introduce next. So else, print, you are finished with the loop. And then when I run this, it's going to print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You will finish with the loop. And we can have else here, but technically we don't need to. We can go like this, and we'll automatically do you are finished with the loop every time we are finished with that, because that's the next line of code. So when we run that, the same thing will output. And that's the basics of while loops. For loops are very similar to while loops, except you don't have to define a variable above. I can do for I can call this anything I, j, k, for number, for I in range 5, print I. So this is going to be very similar to before. The default range starts at 0, and this means that it goes up until 5, but not including 5. And so it will print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, just like before. So when we run this, it should output 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it does. And you also notice that we don't have to put I plus equals 1 like with while loops, because it automatically iterates by 1. Let's say though we didn't want to start at 0. We could do 1 comma 5. That means start at 1 and stop at 5. So when we run this, it will output 1, 2, 3, 4. And the default iteration is by 1. But what if we wanted to iterate by 3? We could do it. Start 1, stop 10, iterate by 3. And when we run this, it should output 1, 4, and 7, and not 10. Because remember, up to, but not including 10. And then let's run this, and 1, 4, and 7. And similarly with the while loop, we can also end it with an else statement, or just continue the code after and just print you are done with the loop. And then it should output 147, you are done with the loop. And that's the basics of for statements. Now we're going to introduce break and continue and use it in a program that outputs a person's name but without vowels. So I'm going to create a variable called username and set it equal to whatever they input. So I'll say, what is your name? Then I will use the function that we learned in a previous video called dot upper that makes everything uppercase. So username dot upper. So whatever it inputs, it will capitalize every letter. And then I'm gonna set another variable equal to name and just leave it blank for right now. You'll see what this does later. And then I'm going to use a for statement. For letter in username. Then I'm going to do if the letter is A, E, I, O, or U. To do this, in a simple if statement, we're going to do if letter in. So it checks if it's in this range of values. A, E, I, O, or U. So if it's in that, we don't want to print it because we just want to print the consonants. So we can do this thing called continue. So it continues to the next iteration of the loop and doesn't continue within this iteration. And otherwise, we're still in this for loop. Then when I'm finished with this for loop, I'm going to print the name. Name plus equals letter. Then when we're finished with this for loop, I'm gonna print the name. So I'll walk through what this does. For letter, we can call this anything, it doesn't matter, in username. So you may be wondering, what's the range? It automatically knows what the range is based on what the user puts, how many letters. One of the nice things about for loops is that it's not always necessary to put the range. We can just put a variable because this is a string. So for every letter in the username, if the letter is in A, E, I, O, or U, it's going to continue. So it's going to go to the next iteration. But if it's a consonant, it's going to add the letter to the name, this empty string that we defined above. And then it's going to print the name. So let me run this, and it's going to say, what is your name? And my name is Jonathan. And then I return, and it returns my name without any vowels. You see here it's all uppercase because we did that upper here. So for letter and username, J is not a vowel, so it adds it. J, O is a vowel, so it goes to the next. N is a consonant, so it adds it to name, and so forth. But let's say we wanted to stop the for loop entirely once we hit the first vowel. We only wanted to print the consonants that started a person's name. Well, we can change this continue statement to break. So what break does, it breaks out of the entire for loop. So this for loop will never happen again because it's finished with it entirely. For example, when I run this and input Jonathan, it's just gonna output J because J is a consonant, so this won't happen. So it's gonna add J to name, but O is a vowel, so it's gonna break out of this. And you're finished with that. So that's how you use break and continue statements, and you can also use them within while loops as well. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to follow along with this video series by subscribing and hitting the notification bell, or by clicking on the next video so that you can expand your knowledge about Python. And as always, I can't wait to see you next time.